When you think about, the idea that he's moving his pro day up 5 weeks, I spoke with Jordan Palmer, who's running his workout today. Normally, he works with guys and trains guys for about 10 weeks before they throw on their pro day. And if there was anybody that could, decide not to throw and have it not affect their draft status, it would be Trevor Lawrence. And I think, Greeny, you can take that back to the college football season. With so many guys opting out, wondering if it was worth it to play through COVID, Trevor Lawrence basically started and led the We Want to Play campaign, and he was a guy that really didn't need to play. He could have sat out and still been the #1 overall draft pick. So I think it speaks a lot to, one, his leadership ability, but two, his desire to just be out there competing, which teams have to love.
I agree completely. It's an interesting thought. And then, Jeremy Fowler, I will come to you, because when Urban Meyer decided to come back or to come to the NFL and start coaching in Jacksonville, the first thought you have is it must be because he wants to coach Trevor Lawrence. And you were telling me that goes back at least 2 years.
Yeah, Urban Meyer's been waiting for this. He watched Trevor Lawrence live in the 2019 semifinal against Ohio State. I'm told he came away from that blown away by the skill set. He said, this is the kind of guy that I need to coach. Now, he hadn't decided on the NFL at that point, but he was trending in that direction anyway. So he wanted to build around a top pick with a team that has a young, bright future. So this is a guy that he's very excited just to see live today. And that's the case with about 15 to 20 teams that are expected to be in attendance. I talked to one exec from a team picking later in the first round. They said, look, we just want to see the kid throw. We've heard all the hype. We want to see the ball come out of his hands live.
And that's the part of it I don't fully understand. Okay, great. They can see the ball come out of his hands. But I have to believe that, look, we all know he's going to be the first pick in this draft, right? So why is anyone besides Jacksonville people even bothering to show up to this, Jeremy?
Well, they want to talk with other execs and people around the league about some potential trades. They can make some moves in February and March. It goes beyond the draft. This is really a limited networking opportunity for some of these teams. There's no combine this year, limited pro day action. They're not going to see many people. So aside from the Senior Bowl, this is really it. And, there's some other Clemson players that they can see as well. And, hey, look, some of these guys may be picking second or third or just holding out some sort of hope that maybe Lawrence would fall to them too, even though that's naive to think that.
Bart Scott, why are you shaking your head?
Well, because when I look at that initial list that we had, RG3, Jameis Winston, Andrew Luck, I don't know if I really want to be on that list, because it shows me that only 1/3 of those players had success. And what's something that some of those players had in common? They went to a place in which they weren't equipped to be able to protect them early on, and they didn't have the weapons around there. So I look at Urban Meyer coming in, and I don't know if I'm Trevor Lawrence, if I really want to be able to get on that list. And I'm looking at maybe a team like Houston that may be a little farther in the process and say, hey, I know it would never happen. They would never trade Deshaun Watson within the division. But maybe him getting out and throwing earlier so he can try and send a signal, a help me signal, because he may not want to be a Jacksonville Jaguar, because we've seen teams and organizations ruin great quarterbacks. Would Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes if he would have landed somewhere other than Kansas City? Would Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes if he would have went to Cincinnati? I think these are all things that top picks have to consider. Right. We saw that consideration with Joe Burrow. So maybe getting out and maybe he gets a lifeline.
And let's just live in a world where we all don't expect that to happen. We've received no indication of it whatsoever. There have been no signals of that sort, Bart. But if there were a circumstance where, and this could sort of conflate the two stories that we're going to lead with today, we're going to get to Deshaun in a minute. If that were to go on the table, Deshaun Watson for the first pick in the draft, Bart, in your opinion, which side should and which side shouldn't do it?
Well, I think Deshaun Watson is really a top 5 quarterback talent in this league. I think Deshaun Watson is outstanding. He's still young. He gives you 15 years or at least 10 years of dominant football. He gives you a guy that you know is proven in his league. But yeah, we can say whatever we want about Trevor Lawrence, but he's an unknown commodity. And we've seen guys come in that are highly touted come in and flame out early because they couldn't get protected. Andrew Luck would still be with us if Indianapolis could protect him early in his career and he didn't sustain all the injuries that he had. We saw Carson Wentz come back to earth. We saw Patrick Mahomes, the baddest man in the planet, come back to earth because they couldn't protect him.
So it's an interesting point here, and we're going to get to Watson right now. And the reality of it is Lawrence could be a terrific player, could live up to all of this hype and not be as good as this guy, Deshaun Watson, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, from one Clemson Tiger to another, because the waiting game continues for him. By now, you know it all. He's officially requested a trade from the Texans. He has reportedly expressed frustration over the team's leadership in the front office. But the team does not show any indication that they are inclined at this point to make this work. So this is what I've been waiting to get to. Jeremy Fowler, I know you have insight into some of the places that Deshaun Watson is interested in going. Let's hear it.
Well, Greeny, here's the latest. I checked in with a source who said Deshaun Watson has a list of teams that he's intrigued by. You know, he's not pigeonholing anything, but he's got a list. I didn't get all the teams, but I was told the Denver Broncos, San Francisco 49ers are two of them. I also asked the source about the Jets and the Dolphins because they have the most draft capital this year and the next few years. I was told the Jets, probably not, maybe more so the Dolphins as far as viability. But Watson knows, look, he has to wait this out. He's got the no trade clause in his contract. But it's all about the Texans continuing to tell teams, and they believe them, that they're not going to trade Deshaun Watson. I've talked to several execs who say they think GM Nick Caserio is dug in here.
I mean, what? I mean, what? So, okay, so the Jets, not likely. I'm going to live in a world where you didn't just say that. Tim Hasselbeck, let me come to you, because I've not had a chance to talk with you during this entire process. Take me through your thoughts on this Deshaun Watson situation. It looks like we're headed for a standoff here. Where do you sit on it all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this. I mean, we're talking as if, Deshaun's got a lot of control in this. And I understand, the no trade clause and things like that. But if he desperately wants out, he can have the preference of teams all he wants. Is he really going to be in a situation where he says, hey, no, don't trade me to New York because it's not on my list? Look, if he really wants out of Houston, then wherever, Houston decides to send him, you'd think that he'd be willing to go. I think Jeremy's, point about the draft capital, I think you have to follow that, especially when we've seen what it costs to get Matthew Stafford, to L.A. So, look, my feelings on this one, I think, are different than a lot of players in that, I think, quarterbacks, the face of the franchise, they certainly have a lot of influence. People should value their opinions because they're a valuable piece, of the franchises. But look, there's also an element too of like, what's the track record to be upset about, hiring a head coach? Like, how many quarterbacks have a great track record of deciding who the head coach should be, or who a quarterback coach should be, or who offensive coordinator should be? Look, they're not asking him to tape ankles. He's not a trainer. They're asking him to play quarterback. They're not asking him to be the head coach of a football team. I think there's an element where a lot of these quarterbacks have gotten over their skis a bit in terms of what their influence should be, in terms of, making big decisions inside the organization.
It does feel, though, Tim, I hear what you're saying. And what you're saying on its face, just taken on its own, is not wrong. But it feels like there's a lot more than that going on in this situation. It feels as though when you look at the way the former players are coming out, when you look at the stuff J.J. Watt is saying, when you look at Andre Johnson and the stuff that he comes out and says and all the rest of it, it feels, Tim, like there's something more than that is going on here in Houston.
Oh, yeah, listen, I'm not disputing that the way things have been handled organizationally there has been great. That's not saying that the guys that are making the decisions there are making the decision better than Deshaun Watson would make it. That's not what I'm saying. Clearly, culturally in the Houston Texans organization, players have left with a bad taste in their mouth on a number of different levels. And that happens other places. I think more referencing in terms of, Deshaun's situation combined with, what Russell Wilson's going through right now, what Aaron Rodgers has felt like. I think there have been plenty of situations where, I think the influence that the quarterback feels like he should have on the organization is a little bit blown out of proportion. That does not mean the way that Houston has